Hey there, all you creepers and reapers. Welcome to another episode of the Femme Fatalities. I'm your co-hostess, Anna, and I'm here with...
Hello, all you frightlings and grieflings. It's Margaret, and today we're gonna venture. We're leaving the planet. Can you tell? Well, you can't see us, but we both dressed appropriately for today's cast. So when it's up on YouTube, you can take a guess. Then, Anna, where are we going today?
This podcast is going to be out of this world, Margaret. We are talking about none other than the movie Alien. Before we get into it, there's some triggers. Of course, my favorite scene is very gory. So there's some body horror, some gore, also sci-fi creatures, definitely all sorts of different little critters running around. Also dynamics in the workplace. This movie came out in the 1970s. There was a lot of dynamic relational issues at that time in terms of where you are in your workspace. What else would you say would be a trigger in this movie?
I think you covered them all. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, without further
Confined
ado,
spaces. That might be one. They
yeah,
are in a spaceship. They are in confined spaces.
yes. And also the idea of no escape. That
Yes.
could be as well. And I think that the film itself is a metaphor for human sexuality. If you agree with me, awesome. If you don't, that's okay too. But we'll get into that a little bit later. So, Margaret, what do you think we should talk about first?
Ooh, that is a great question. You want to go ahead and dive into human sexuality? Because I got my own thoughts about what this movie is actually saying. I'm going
Yeah,
a little different than you, not into human sexuality.
okay, yeah. So for me, I do think there is definitely a theme of human sexuality. As I said, the film came out in the late 1970s. We're coming off of Women's Lib. We're talking about workplace environments. We have our protagonist, if I can talk, our protagonist, Ripley, who is a woman, right? So, and she's in power. She's trying to address this crew primarily made up of men. Um, they're not super receptive to what she's saying or doing. We also have a male character who essentially gives birth to an alien baby, right? The chest burster scene. Fun fact, by the way, I read that the actors on the film were not made aware of what was going to happen. They knew there was going to be a horror scene, but not what it entailed. So all of the screaming and freaking out is genuine. They had no clue about the chest burster. But also, when we look at the xenomorph itself, right? Um, you could almost say there's something phallic when the alien queen opens her mouth. What comes out? It's wet, it's covered in mucus, right? Saliva, all of these things. It has a certain shape, right? It's related to production of other aliens, right? And we get into fertility, hosting, all of these sorts of things. And I think part of the shock of the chest burster scene is, you know, it's a man biologically, cisgender females are associated with childbirth in our society, right? Especially at that time. So we have this man who is giving birth to this baby
Mm-hmm.
alien, and it's very shocking. So I think that's where the human sexuality kind of comes into play. A lot of phallic references, a lot of gender role identification, the chest burster scene, those sorts of things. What about you, Margaret? What's your take?
Well, I love that you bring up, right? It does explore a lot of gender roles. Even the alien impregnates him and then he gives birth to the alien baby. Even the dynamics. Like Ripley is supposed to be a higher ranking officer on this
Mm-hmm.
ship. And oftentimes the men on board demean her. They're like, no, because I said so. It doesn't matter if you have more rank
Mhm.
than me. I'm making this decision. And the people listen to the man. So you touch on that dynamic as well. I really, the coworker guy who actually turns out to be an android,
Yeah.
when he's talking about how the corporation wants the alien back because it is a perfect weapon. It is a perfect
Yeah.
specimen. It has no emotions, and how the android seems enamored with the
Mhm.
fact that this being is just a being with no emotions. And I really took that as how in society we often see emotions as a bad thing.
Mhm.
It is better to be emotionless, and how they were working towards
Yeah.
the idea that we're better weapons, we're better people without emotion.
Mhm. You know what that makes me think about? So I don't know if you ever watched Star Trek, but my dad was a bit of a Trekkie. I watched a lot on reruns with him when I was a kid. Even now when I visit, sometimes we watch it together. But there were these alien races, right? So Dr. Spock was half Vulcan and half human. And Vulcans are logical, right? So they don't put emotion before logic. And a lot of the time, the Vulcan community was very eager to remind Spock that he was only half, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you are subject to emotional reaction because you're only half Vulcan. But on top of that, there's this other alien race called Romulans, right? And they're ruthless. They just act on instinct. There is no emotion. So they are the destroyers, right? So they're scary to Vulcans. And I just think it's really fun to parallel that to the movie Alien, because you have all of these different levels of emotional height or emotional depth, as well as robotic leverage that you're incorporating in so many different ways.
Yes, I love that you bring that up, and all the different ways that Alien is exploring humanity, sexuality, gender roles, while they're all on this tiny little spaceship battling the new enemy, the alien, and
Yeah.
how even emotion is what took them there. There is a distress signal, so they have to go and check it out. That, well,
Mhm.
we need to save who's ever in danger, and not that,
Yeah.
what are we going, like, what are we walking into? And that gets them in trouble, unless maybe, who knows, maybe the corporation had
Yeah.
an idea that there was something out in the universe that they could weaponize.
Right. And they may very well have. I mean, I think that when we get into the second one, Aliens, we see so much more too, right? Because she ends up in this situation where there's still so much asset protection going on behind the scenes. And it's almost like there's no care at all
Mm-hmm.
for um her as a survivor of this tragedy that happened, and all of these other things going on. I don't know if you've heard the theory though, and I'm interested to know your thoughts on this. The cat, there's this theory that the cat is a robot. It's a cyborg cat.
Ooh, I have not heard that theory. I like that theory. That is, but then it wouldn't make sense for the first one, because the cat is very reactive to the
Mm-hmm.
alien presence, even to where it's like the humans have
Mm-hmm.
ignored or denied their
Yeah.
animal instinct, because the cat is like,
Oh yeah.
fuck you, there's an alien behind you. And people are just like, "Doo-doo-doo, what's wrong
Yeah.
with the cat? Why is the cat upset?"
Yeah. Do you need tender victuals? Are you okay? Like,
Mhm.
yeah, and I do think that, in terms of animal susceptibility, and a lot of people think that animals have that extra sense compared to humans, and we really see it with the cat in the film. Um, I much prefer Alien and the xenomorphs to the Thing, because when I was a kid, my parents were watching it. And of course, the scene with the dog, teenagers in the woods, hack them up. I don't care. It's fine. But when it comes to like animals and children getting maimed or killed, it's just not for me, even when I was a little kid. So I can remember telling my mom, I like Alien because they leave the cat alone. Like, who cares about the chest bursting scene? As long as Kitty Cat's fine, it's all good.
I think a lot of us are that way. I believe I've shared before that if I'm watching a movie and I'm at home, I will get on the internet. I will be like,
Mm-hmm.
Alien, did the cat die? This
Yeah.
movie, did the animal die? So that I can
Mm-hmm.
be prepared. I don't want to see the cat die. And you touched on the
Mm-hmm.
movies that get us when animals are harmed or
Oh, yeah.
children are harmed. Sinister is a great movie. Hopefully one day we'll do a cast on it. That one is hard because there
Yeah.
are children. And I find that I'm like, when people are like, Sinister's my favorite horror movie, I'm like, I struggled with that one because there are children that are being victimized. And sadly,
Mm-hmm.
that is part of our society, that our
Mm-hmm.
most innocent are often the most
Like
victimized
sustainable.
and
Yeah.
hurt.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, we've already posted it. We've talked about it. That was me with Five Nights at Freddy's. It's just the subject matter made it a really hard watch for me. And I think sometimes when we challenge ourselves to view films that are beyond what we normally watch, it can be beneficial, even if it's like a one and done situation. But yeah, I mean, never, like Margaret and I have this kind of agreement that we're never going to push each other to watch something that we know goes super beyond our comfort level. Like we've discussed several movies that we know, like, okay, this is going to be a solo cast or we're going to have someone else come on or whatever, because, and I think this is really important, whether you're going to the movies with someone or you're talking to someone about what's going on in your life or their life, to know and acknowledge and accept boundaries that people have, because we all have boundaries. They're all different. That doesn't mean one boundary is greater or lesser than another. It's just very important to be conscientious and thoughtful when it comes to other people and their boundaries, as well as yourself and your own boundaries. And, luckily, I think that I have a wonderful co-hostess here. I think that we're very considerate and thoughtful towards one another. And it's important to have that in your life. Like if you're listening, I bet you can probably think of someone in your life who embodies that. And, make sure you stick around that person.
Yes, thank you. And likewise, yeah, because we all have our limitations, and knowing your limitations and having that be respected. We could argue that in Alien, Ripley's
Mm-hmm.
limitations are not honored. They are not
Yeah.
respected. The mission is more important. Whoever, I found most of the men pretty much demeaning, like, well, I
Mm-hmm.
know more, I know better, doesn't matter. And
Mm-hmm.
you don't need those people
Right.
in your life. Like, they are, let them go if that's at work, if that's
Yeah.
in your personal life, because that doesn't feel
Yeah.
good, because she's really trying to say, hey, like, let's be smart here, let's do this, and they're just like, well, no, we'll do it this way.
Yeah. And then that
I'm
doesn't
gonna push
pan
you.
out very well. Yeah. Well, and that's, oftentimes I think rather than getting upset and rather than getting defensive, a great comeback to someone who has been there, done that, wrote the book, knows more than you, and thinks you should behave or act in another way. Oh, it sounds like you've already had this experience. Perhaps you should focus on your own future and how that benefits you while I navigate my own.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Yes.
fine to say. I mean, they might not like it or agree with it, but it's good to have that attitude. Like, you know what? They've had an experience relative to this, or they think they have, and they're not an excellent choice to assist me in
Mm-hmm.
my journey.
Yes.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, even if a person is unable to express or acknowledge their own limitations towards you, sometimes you can see those limitations and there's nothing you can do about it other than figure out what's going to be most beneficial to you.
Yeah. Take care of yourself. I
Mm-hmm.
agree with Whit.
Yeah.
You said, yeah.
Totally. Definitely. Now, okay, we're talking about Alien, right? We talked a little
Mhm.
bit about Aliens. Alien 3 it's kind of weird, like prison in space type
Mhm.
thing. But I still liked it. It's okay. Like,
Mhm.
if it was on TV and I didn't have anything else to do and some time to kill, I'd probably watch it again. But I think it's how the characters develop. Like, right, you have Ripley, the strong woman who survives the first one, right? And then the second one, we see this maternal saving nature.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
the way that her character is developed and exposed,
Mhm.
you really see that. And then, of course, the third one, there's the crash. And one of the things that I recall the doctor says to her is, when you get back to Earth, you could meet someone, you could get married, you could have a family. And to me, it was just humorous because here she is, she's been through all of this trauma, all of these crazy events. And like, the first thing out of your mouth is like, go back to Earth, find a partner, get married, start a family. I'm like, it's probably the last thing she needs to be focused
Mhm.
on right now.
And again, that focus that because she's a woman, she's going
Mm-hmm.
to want to get married and start a family. I'm
Right.
guessing he wouldn't have said that to any of the men on the ship and being able
Mm-hmm.
to be like, well, maybe one of the guys wants to get
Yeah.
back to Earth and get married and start a family,
Mm-hmm.
and that's going to be, yeah, that's how I'm going to survive this so I can get back home. She's had enough trauma. She's been through it.
Right. Like,
Yeah.
and I think, oftentimes we kind of reference these social expectations of gender roles. This is not us saying there's anything wrong with that. One of the greatest things that you can find in the world is a partner or another person who relates to you on a level that you never maybe even thought was possible. And to have a life with that person, whether it's a friendship, a familial relationship, a marriage, all of these different things, that's very rare and it's very beautiful and it's very wonderful. So please don't think that we're knocking that, because we certainly aren't. We're just talking in a broad sense about society's expectations and roles, especially as it applies to the years that these films came out and how it relates to their genres.
Yes, well said. We are talking about how, like Anna is saying, the movie is reflecting the standards of the time. So we're discussing in the movie world, and so if you're listeners, so many movies really do go into gender norms. And again, I'll invite you again if you know movies that really push that or exemplify that or normalize things outside of what modern, not even modern, just contemporary society feels as what gender roles are. Please, we both love movies that
Yes.
push those limits and say, no, actually, Ripley told the doctor, I bet you really can't wait till you get back to Earth and get married and have a family. Because
Mm-hmm.
as you listeners know, Anna and I really love how horror reflects what is happening in
Yeah,
society, how it really just brings societal issues to the forefront through the genre.
definitely. Yeah, and let's not forget one of the most important characters in this series of films, the queen herself,
Mm-hmm.
our xenomorph. She's trying to survive. She's trying to sustain her species. So think about it this way, right? These humans come into your space. They're bothering your eggs, your offspring, your children. What are you going to do?
You're gonna protect them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
And
And
she's gonna, right, like Anna's saying, she's trying to ensure the livelihood of her children, that very maternal instinct that she has. She could have been a he with all the babies. It's that parental
mhm.
drive that says, I need to protect my children at all costs. And that's what she's doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they could be like seahorses. Maybe the eggs get laid and then the masculine ones, take care of the eggs or whatever until they hatch. Um, Although I will have to say, I'm thinking about AVP now, right? Getting into the Alien versus Predator world. The first one is good. The second one I don't care for at all. I'll never watch it again. I heartily dislike the maternity ward scene. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, proceed with caution. But it made me so sad when they discover the xenomorph queen and she is chained up and she's like just this baby factory, and then they're used for like hunting sport by predator. And oh, that was like a whole other viewing experience. Have you seen AVP?
I've seen the first one. I haven't seen it in a long time, so I'm gonna have to rewatch it
Yeah,
to
we're gonna
remember, because
have to visit that. Yeah, but
I was even thinking Prometheus too.
mm-hmm,
I need to rewatch, because that is actually a prequel, which gives a lot of insight into Alien, and
mm-hmm.
I feel like we only have like 10 movies to watch now
Right. 10 million, no. And we love it too. So if you guys listeners have any suggestions, let us know. But the thing about AVP, I think it really flips the script, so we won't talk about it too much. Maybe we'll do an episode on that. But
Well, yes, because listeners,
yeah.
we are gonna have hopefully monthly sci-fi
Mm-hmm.
horror adjacent movies. So, because sci-fi really it is the sister to
Oh
horror.
yeah.
And so we really want to bring in some more, I don't
Just
know.
yeah, some more
Yeah.
characters, some different topics, and talk about what we see and what we find, and how things kind of run parallel to one another, and what we're really seeing, and how it's kind of fun because then you get these mashups in sci-fi and in horror. Like, I mean, AVP, Freddy versus Jason, like those sorts of things. And it kind of turns these old familiar friends into new characters, and how do we move forward and proceed with this, and it's just a lot of fun.
Yes. Yeah. So we will discuss AVP so I can rewatch it. I'm pretty sure I saw it at the movie theater when it came out years ago.
Yeah, that's it's definitely an oldie but goodie. So actually the actress that plays Blade's mom is our main protagonist in the first AVP. So
Ooh.
yeah, yeah. So it's fun to kind of see like the actors and actresses that were like super hot at the time when like
Mm-hmm.
specific films came out, because you keep seeing them in very different roles, and that's kind of a blast too. And I really would almost, I feel like a lot of like the Marvel DC movies, even though they're dubbed action, I think a lot of them are borderline like sci-fi action, because
Mm-hmm.
you have, especially with Marvel, you have mutants, right? That is kind of like science fiction in a sense. You're genetically mutated. And I think it's fun. It's also kind of horror because you look at society's views of mutants, and um, you know, kind of gets into the reality horror. But anyway,
Yeah.
back to our little ditty about our little friend that lives on the spaceship and gets disturbed by the humans. I think that there's a lot that they could do with like the alien films too, if they make any more.
They are,
Just be
I think, right? One's supposed to come out this year. A standalone
Mhm.
Alien movie this year is supposed to come
Yeah.
out.
I think it would be fun to know more about like the galaxy they come from, and what's going on in the xenomorphic life, and those
Mm-hmm.
sorts of things. I think that would be really cool.
Oh, I
What
agree. And that, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, what are your hopes for Lady Xenomorph? That's what I'll call the alien
I
queen.
think, yeah, more backstory. It feels like
Mhm.
Alien really did it. preyed on our fear of the unknown, and
Yeah.
then the unknown meeting something that we couldn't have any control over, something that
Mhm.
would be stronger than us,
Yeah.
smarter than us, something that could dominate us. And
Mhm.
I'm guessing that's probably why they didn't give Alien the backstory, because if they
Right.
did, the xenomorph, right, then we might have more empathy or
Yeah.
compassion if we
Right.
knew, than just being like, oh my gosh, this is so scary. There's a monster
Mhm.
out in the universe that, and I
Yeah.
love Anna, how you're like, she's a mom, she's protecting her
Mhm.
babies, we're afraid of
Yeah.
her. And yet we invaded her house.
Mhm.
We're taking her baby.
Yep.
Yeah, she's going to have a reaction to it.
Mhm. Right. And we have this whole maternal side, and then we also have, when we look at the xenomorph and what's going on with the humans, we have this dripping, oozing monster. If it enters me, I'm going to be injected or impregnated, right? So
Hmm.
there's this whole loving maternal portion to it, and then this whole fear associated with anything in the maternal world, right? And I think that it's beautifully done. I like the fact that the xenomorph victims are not just one gender, um, because I think it's delightful, and it exposes very deep rooted quizzical fears that people have as well. And I think it does it on such a subconscious level that unless you really sit down and think about it and pull it apart and put it back together, it's not recognizable.
I love how you touch on that, right? That it is really this, the xenomorph is a predator,
Mm-hmm.
and it's wanting to prolong its species, which we could say humans also
Mm-hmm.
do. Weird, like, we want to keep the human species around, so we have to keep breeding. And that the xenomorph's like, okay, you are a vessel
Mm-hmm.
for this, so I'm going to go ahead and impregnate you. I find it very interesting that this is a male creator for this film. And so
Mm-hmm.
even again, we're going into the film world, that male facing fear of things they don't understand,
Mm-hmm.
pregnancy, being entered, being violated. And I feel, and please, listeners, let us know how you feel, female facing.
Mm-hmm.
Pregnancy is something that we are familiar with, whether we've had it or we know people who have, and that it's, there are different fears. Being pregnant as a woman and being a man, those are two different
Mm-hmm.
fears for each
Oh yeah.
gender. And so it's fascinating to see, right, that fear, how it manifests
Mm-hmm.
throughout the movie, because nobody wants to be impregnated by the xenomorph, whether you're female or male. You
Yeah.
don't want that, because you're now just a baby carrier that's gonna die when
Mm-hmm.
the baby's born.
Yeah. You don't want that little chest burster hanging out in your corpse. Well, yeah, and the thing is too, I think that with pregnancy, there are so many different things. And as you said, like being cisgender females, the fact that our bodies do things to us every 28 days, regardless if there's something growing inside or not. I mean, we have to deal with that for 30, 40, even maybe 50 years, depending on our biologic history and our genetics, right? And then there's this whole other portion where, you spend the majority of your life trying not to get pregnant. And then the issues that kind of potentially come up when you actually want to get pregnant, or, a pregnancy that's unforeseen or one that's not viable with full gestation. There are so many different issues related to that as well. And like, what am I carrying inside of me? And the questions that one could ask, that are very unique to that experience.
I love how you touch on that, and that when a woman is pregnant, she loses her body. Her body is now, it's the vehicle that is the baby that's taking care of the baby. And if you think about both genders,
Mm-hmm.
or anybody who decides to become a parent, there is this loss of the pre-parent person. So there is this death who the person was before the pregnancy, before the adoption, before the baby came into the world, and
Mm-hmm.
then who you become once you have the baby, once the child comes into your life. And again, this procreation, Alien is a movie about,
Mm-hmm.
right? The fear of procreation of something that we don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
Alien's going to be a perfect weapon so that the humans can continue to procreate and
Yeah,
be the dominant
exactly.
species. And I just love how Anna touches on that grief, the loss that we experience pre-pregnancy to post-pregnancy, post-child.
Totally. Yeah, and it's once again we look at sustainability of our individual bloodlines as a whole, our species, all of these things. And as Margaret mentioned, I mean, even in the sense of us being the dominant species, right? How frightening the movie Alien is. There is this species that we're not familiar with, we know nothing about, that just shows up, right? We're here to do a job and to check on things. And here it comes to dominate our species and become number one in the pecking order.
Yes. And it even, look at the android. Like, they didn't even know that their colleague was an
Mm-hmm.
android. So that is unnerving too, that not only could they be replaced by an alien, they could be replaced by an alien that looks like
Mm-hmm.
them. They thought the robot guy was one of them until he dies, and that
Yeah.
fear there, that's like, what is happening?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Are we really?
Yeah, like what is going on? And as we delve further into the films, Lance Henriksen's character, the bot, resurfaces, and Ripley is so comforted just to see a familiar face. Um, Lest we forget, it's a human robot interaction. So I think that the movies were really ahead of their time in terms of AI, robotic maintenance, interaction, those sorts of things. I think that they really took those ideas into account.
Yes. Yeah, for sure they did. Looking at like what they just really reflected on, what is it to be alive? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and how do we survive?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And it's great. I mean, of course, like the movie itself is wonderful entertainment value. If you've never seen it, please, please, please make sure you do. The chest burster scene, I'm sure you can tell, is one of my absolute favorite cinematic moments. It's just great. I mean, and I just love how it just jumps out and scurries. I think it's cute. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, now I have to ask, who do you most relate to in this film, Margaret?
I'm going to go with the cat. I'm going to
Oh,
go with that. I just don't want to be around it. Like, I'm running away because I know it's there, and let's just get off this ship and let's just go. Usually I'm comforting. Usually, like, I'm cool.
mm-hmm.
And when I'm afraid,
Yeah.
yeah, let me out of here. How about you?
Um, that's a really good question. I definitely not Ripley. I almost feel like Lance Henriksen's character, in the sense of not being a robot, but what you're expressing outwardly, even though that's part of your programming, is not completely relational to everything that's going on inside. And I really like that kind of idea and metaphor and how we could apply it to anyone, right? So you have this kind of topical thing that's going on. You're coming to work, you're doing your job, you're being polite, you're being cordial, you're doing as you're asked, you're providing input as needed. But little does anyone know, you feel like a complete, like, robot on autopilot on the inside, or you have all of these feelings and emotions, or you have battery acid eating away at your soul. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of comparison to that, and I really enjoy thinking about it in that way.
Ooh, I love that perspective. Yes, yeah,
Yeah. And also that
wonderful.
he's
Thank you for
essentially
sharing.
like impervious to the xenomorph because you can always put him back together.
Mhm. Yes.
Very cool. Well, we hope that everyone enjoyed this cast. We're definitely excited about getting some more sci-fi stuff out there. So I'm sure, as you know, we've talked about Alien, Predator's going to be coming. So is Terminator and a few others. But if you have any suggestions, please, please, please let us know. We are happy to take a look and provide some thanatological input, as well as just some film analysis and feedback in general, especially if we haven't seen it. It's always fun to hear reactions of others to a film that a person suggests. So definitely let us know. And until next time, stay creepy.
See you next time.